Indonesia will begin moving its capital from Jakarta to the island of Borneo, President Joko Widodo announced in late August. Construction is scheduled to start in 2021 and government offices will relocate to the new city in phases from 2024, along with as many as 1.5 million employees and their families. The relocation will cost an estimated $33 billion spread over 10 years. All of this begs the question, what's wrong with Jakarta? I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Believe it or not, the idea to move the Indonesian capital has been a topic of discussion since the inception of the state. In fact, in 1957, Indonesia's first president, Sukarno, envisioned the small city of Palangkaraya as the capital for Mapilindo, which was a proposed confederation that included Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The plan never materialized, and instead, the seat of the Indonesian government shifted from island to island because it was difficult to determine the exact seat of power. Eventually, in 1964, Sukarno settled for Jakarta as the official capital. Over the decades, Jakarta grew to a city of 10 million, or 30 million when accounting those in its greater metropolitan area, while the alternative capital, Palangkaraya, remained a sleepy town of some 270,000 people. Since 2010, however, some policymakers have started to revive the memory of Palangkaraya as the capital of Indonesia, but all proposals kept on failing. Then, in April 2019, the newly re-elected president Joko Widodo, also known as Jokowi, proposed a $33 billion project to relocate the capital to another city by 2024. What set his proposal apart is the indicated timeline and budget. Also, Jokowi stated that the relocation of the new capital would be an administrative operation with only the government and its employees shifting places. Jakarta will remain the economic epicenter of the nation. No government can change those market forces. Since the announcement, several cities have been pitched as the next capital, such as Jonggol in West Java, Sidenrengrapang in South Sulawesi, and topping the list, Palangkaraya in Borneo. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's look at everything that is wrong with the current capital. Foremost, Jakarta is a typical Asian megacity sinking under the weight of its own dysfunction, literally so. Every year, the city sinks by an average of 17 centimeters due to rising sea levels and poor management of groundwater extraction. You see, Jakarta suffers from a subsidence crisis. Only 4% of the city's wastewater is treated. This causes massive pollution to nearby rivers and forces people to extract their clean water from underground, rendering the building atop susceptible to collapse. Climate change and rising sea levels is another factor that contributes to the sinking of Jakarta. For over a decade, the government has been in a race against the sea. A steady stream of floods has devastated homes, vehicles, and businesses all over the capital. Some of those floods have even been deadly. The government has considered all sorts of proposals to stop the flooding, including one to construct a giant wall in the sea. Now, however, the state has come to terms that it just might be losing the fight against nature. Already, as much as 40% of Jakarta sits below sea level, and by 2050, up to 95% of North Jakarta, currently home to 1.4 million people, is expected to submerge. By that time, the overcrowded metropolitan area of Jakarta is also expected to grow from nearly 30 million to 35.6 million, making it the world's biggest city. But there's only so much a city can handle until its infrastructure caves in. With 3.5 million daily commuters, Jakarta is infamous for its endemic traffic, with congestion costing the government nearly $7 billion a year in lost productivity. Over the years, the government has invested tens of billions of dollars to improve the infrastructure, but it has thus far little to show for. With issues such as traffic congestion, pollution, overpopulation, and flooding, it's no wonder that the government feels the urgency and temptation to move the capital. However, environmental concern is only part of the motive for the relocation. The Republic of Indonesia is a remarkably vast and diverse country with more than 17,000 islands, stretching for more than 5,000 kilometers. That's roughly the distance from Iceland to Azerbaijan, marking the extreme corners of the European continent. It's a testament to the resolve of Indonesian policymakers that they managed to unify such a domain, considering the hundreds of different ethnic, cultural, and religious backgrounds. Maintaining that unity has always been the government's top priority. Plus, the idea is that moving the capital away from Java Island would encourage new avenues for investment in other places. From an economic lens, Indonesia has long sought to develop new centers of growth outside the islands of Java and Sumatra, which separately generate 58% and 20% of the country's GDP respectively. The key is to move the capital to an existing city where the local economy can benefit from the relocation, but it cannot be too far away from Jakarta. By these criteria, Palangkaraya in Borneo, the alternative capital in the 1960s, is a good fit. The city sits some 900 kilometers to the northeast of Jakarta in central Kalimantan, which is the Indonesian part of Borneo. Although Jokowi never revealed the exact location or the name of the new capital, government officials did state that the site will be somewhere in Borneo. If Palangkaraya does turn out to be the new capital, it will bring forth its own set of problems. Borneo, which is shared by 3 nations, suffers from its own pollution and land subsidence issues. The once majestic rainforests of Borneo have withered considerably over the decades. Illegal logging and deliberate burning have destroyed a third of the tropical rainforests. Deforestation has made more space available for oil palm plantations, but it has also released high amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So the poor air quality in Jakarta is prevalent in Borneo as well, albeit to a lesser degree. Furthermore, Indonesia's new capital would take up about 30,000 hectares, with housing to be constructed for 900,000 to 1.5 million people, mostly government employees and their families. The sudden arrival of so many people would endanger the remaining forests and wildlife, but it would also raise carbon emissions and contribute to the sinking of the area. By all accounts, the whole capital relocation project seems poorly thought out. For Jokowi, however, it makes perfect sense. He came to office on the promise of unity and infrastructure. During Jokowi's first term, the state spent about $350 billion on various infrastructure projects, with another $412 billion planned for the next 5 years. Shifting the capital to another area would help strengthen the sense of unity in the country, thereby fulfilling his campaign promises. However, before relocation can proceed, Jokowi's administration will have to obtain the necessary funding. The government, for instance, only plans to fund up to 19% of the total cost, with the remainder being funded by a mix of state-owned and private firms. In his announcement, Jokowi mentioned that the burden has become too heavy on Jakarta as the center of government, finance, trade, and services. That might be true, but relocating the capital will in no way address any of Jakarta's complications. Just because the government moves to another city doesn't mean that established businesses will simply pack up and follow suit. There is no incentive for them to do so. Jakarta will keep growing regardless of the presence of government offices. Traffic congestion, pollution, overpopulation, and rising sea levels will all persist into the future. The residents of Jakarta will all remain, and the problems they face will still be there. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Credit goes to our gracious Patreon community for making content like this possible. If you want to learn more or gain access to some perks, visit the link in the description. Thank you for watching, and Sahol.